V'hinei mikan, page Gimel Amud Aleph, the new paragraph. And I've mentioned this to you before, that when the Alter Rebbe printed the Tanya, he didn't print this piece. From V'hinei mikan to the end of the page was not printed, and the Sibur was Bepashas. He didn't want to be Mafusha Machlekes. He didn't want to make the war between Hasidim and Misnagdim stronger than it already was. So he deleted it. 103 years after the original printing of the Tanya, in Tov Reish Samach 1900, the first Tanya was Tov Kuf Nun Zayin. So the Rebbe Rashab redid the Tanya, and he made what's called Tfus Vilna. This is a facsimile of Tfus Vilna, and he added this shtickle. And the Kopasta Yamalt, who passed away that year, the Zalman Kopasta condemned the Rebbe for doing it. The Rebbe Rashab was his uncle, was his cousin. But the Kopasta was older than the Rebbe Rashab's father. You understand? They were cousins, but there was a chiluk between them of 31 years. And the Kopasta came out and criticized the Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe didn't print it how you tell him. You did print it. Lapel Mamish, this became the Tanya that all Chabad Chassidim used with this V'hinei Mikan. The Rebbe Rashab put it back in. And the Teichen, of course, is to argue the union of Tzimtzum Shlei Kipshuta. We know three Achtasen. Amacham Bekitzer. We have the Achtas of Chakira, which is the Malachim or the Galgalim are tools in the Eibishter's hand. We have the Achtas of Kabbalah, which is that the Sfiris are they're one with the Eibishter, and therefore they're one with one another, and therefore the creation that they made using the combination of different Sfiris, which in our Tanya we have three names of the Eibishter, which the Alter Rebbe explained to us: Havaya and Elikim and Adnai, that creates the Metzias of the world and creates the Metzias of Zman and Mokum. Is since they're one with their source, so the world created by them is also one. And then he brings the third Achtas. The third Achtas is that Eidin Safas all over. And Bepashtas, this is the Shir of Thursday. Eidin Safas all over means save of Kalamid. It doesn't mean the Chayes of Malak Kalamid. And he brings the Raya from the Rambam. That the Rambam explains, mitzad the question of Yediyah, that the Lakus is everywhere. Lakus has to be everywhere. Otherwise it becomes a question of how does Hashem know what's happening in a changing world without it affecting a change in Him. And I summarized for you, when I taught you this on Friday, right? The Meir Nevuchim. And he explains more about Arichas, who Ayidei and Ayidu and Wamada, since everything is one with the Eibishter, and there is no Zman. So the future and the past are one and the same. So there's absolutely no Shina. If it's outside of the Eibishter, even if you're going to say that the Klapa the Eibishter, there's no Zman. But the Klapa the world, there is Zman. So if Klapa the world, there is Zman, and the place of the world is separate from Malakus, there's a Chilk Tzvish and Keach and Peil, as it's actually called in some Maimorim, the Gabi different in Yonim. There's a difference between before it occurs and after it occurs. As opposed to, if we say the world is one with the Eibishter, in other words, the world doesn't really exist. So then there's no Chilik between before it happens and after it happens in our Zman. So there's zero Shinoi, and therefore there's no Shaila of Yediyah. This is what the Alter Rebbe said, explaining the Rambam. And now the Alter Rebbe says the same exact thing, but using the Lashon HaKabbalah. It's the same issue. Rambam used the Lashon Huvadaita Yachad, and the Kabbalah used the issue from Tzimtzum Shlei Kipshuta. V'hinei mikan. This Rambam, and this third Achtas, which we learn about now for two Shiurim, Thursday's Shir and Friday's Shir, the bottom of Pei Beis Amud Aleph and weiter. Yesh lahavim, we can understand Shigigas Miktas Chachamim Beineim, the error of a few wise men in their own eyes. Havaya Yechaper Ba'adam. The Alter Rebbe says they need to have kapora, because Sheshagu V'Ta'u, they erred and they misinterpreted. Be'yunim be'kisvei ha'arizal, and analyzing the kisvei ha'arizal. Ve'hevinu inyan ha'tzimtzum muskir sham, and they understood and interpreted the idea of tzimtzum written in kisvei ha'arizal kipshuta, as though it's being literal. Now we know that there's a ribui tzimtzum. We know there's a ribui tzimtzum. There's a ribui tzimtzum of seider ishtashlos, but tzimtzum of seider ishtashlos are called miyot. The issue that we're addressing is be'ikar l'gabe tzimtzum addition, because tzimtzum addition is talking about what we call in Kabbalah eagle, Eidin Sof, save of Kalam, the godliness, the light of the Eibishter. And Tzimtzum Rishon is called Siluk. He removes it completely. Then later on he brings back a Kav, but the Eidin Sof is Nistalik, and you should know that even though it's not written in Tanya explicitly, but the Rebbe explains that there's actually two parts to the union of Tzimtzum. First is Oir, and the second is Ma'ir. And the Rebbe brings in his essay, the short little page that the Rebbe wrote on Tzimtzum, that the Gra held Tzimtzum Kipshuta not only in Oir, but in Moir. Not only is the Eibishter's light not here, but Kvayachal Eibishter himself is not here, because it's a Mokum Tumah. It's a place of Klipa V'Sitrachara. So the Rebbe has many commentary where he writes that our issue with the Gra is not so much his Shita, that he says Tzimtzum Kipshuta. It's his Nimuk. If the Gra would say Tzimtzum Kipshuta, and he would argue the reason I'm saying Tzimtzum Kipshuta is because the Arizal says Tzimtzum is Tzimtzum. So we would say that mitzad Nimna and Nimnois, mitzad Hepach L'mayla, Menasechel, it's possible that we should create a world different of Tzimtzum. But the fact that he says, Efsher li is b'makam ha'ashba, Hashem can't believe in the place of Tumah and Klippa, this is our objection. You can't say about the Eibush that Efsher. But they held that the Tzimtzum is Kipshutei. And again, there's different four shitas. Some say Tzimtzum Kipshutei only in Eid, and not in Moed. The Reb Chaim Volozhin, the Rebbe says, held Tzimtzum Shalei Kipshutei, Sayer Eid and Sayer Moed. He's very close to us. The Chilik sufficient his shita, and our shita writes the Rebbe is that we hold Tzimtzum Shalei Kipshutei, like Reb Chaim Volozhin says. But when it comes to Moed, we hold HaMoed Hu Be'ez Galus. We hold that there's no Tzimtzum at all. It's not even Tzimtzum Shalei Kipshutei, it's not even Hella. We say the Eibishter himself is here and he's Be'ez Galus. This is the difference between Chassidus, the Alter Rebbe, and Teirei Pashas V'yeda, and what the Reb Chaim Volozhin writes. The Rebbe says there's no question in my mind that Reb Chaim Volozhin saw the Tanya before he wrote his Sefer Nefesh HaChaim. V'hushpa mimen, he was influenced by it, and then when he wrote his Nefesh HaChaim, which was supposed to be the Misnagdish Tanya, so the Chassidim they shouldn't learn Tanya, you could see the Rebbe writes the effect of the Alter Rebbe on him. They understood the idea of Tzimtzum, which is written in Kisvei Eliezer Kipshutei, though it's literal. What does literally mean? That the Eibishter is not here. Shakadosh Baruch Hu, that the Eibishter removed his essence, whatever the word essence means, from the space of this world, and now in this space and in this time he's not. What about Achtus? If Hashem is not here, that's Hipach Achtus. Achtus is one of the Tiyag mitzvahs Atera, right? A goy has a mitzvah of Emunah. And according to Rambam, it's not just to believe, it's to know the Eibishter. Yidden have a second mitzvah, what the Zohar calls Be'erach Prat. It's not enough to know Hashem in general, Be'erach Prat. What's Be'erach Prat? That you have to know, not just that Hashem is one, but that the world is part of the Eibishter's oneness. If the Eibishter was Mesalach himself, what about Achtus? And the answer is, the Eibishter is involved, but from outside of the Makam HaCholol, B'Hashgacha Pratis, by divine intervention and personal and detailed Hashgacha. Al Kol HaYetzurim Kulm, of all the various formations and creations, Asher B'Shamayim Imel Avaloris Mitachos, of the heavens above and the earth below. In other words, there's a kav. And the kav is Nimshach from the beginning of Ishtasos till the end of Ishtasos. And the lowest points of Ishtasos, this kav becomes Neiga. It becomes Klipa V'Sitra Achra. So the Eibishter hides himself in Neiga, and through Neiga, he's mashgiach, hashgacha pratis on everything. We can't only malumdus and see if you can hold Tzimtzum Kipshutei, whether you can hold hashgacha pratis on Dei Mitzvah Achai. And the Rebbe writes there's no stira, there's no contradiction. But it's not for now. Bottom line is they hold that Sev of Kalalman is not here. Bottom line some hold at least that the Eibishter himself is not here. Why? Because it's a makam of Tumah v'Klippa. His involvement is through the Kav. So the world is separate from the Eibishter. The Kav doesn't make the world one with the Eibishter. It just keeps the Eibishter involved. Zakter v'hinei. The Alter Rebbe is going to slug up this sheet of Tzimtzum Kipshutei with three basic rayas. Number one, first of all, it doesn't make any common sense to say idea of literal removal on the Eibishter Shomi Mikri Aguf, which is a physical phenomenon. Allah Kadosh Baruch, when you talk about Hashem and even about Hashem linis gatlachkeit, because Haniv Dal Mehem Ribidiv Vesadol Zadin gets that Hashem has removed myriads of separations beyond measure. In other words, this whole visual, when you imagine Tzimtzum, you're imagining Mokkah, and you're imagining here and there, and Hashem being here versus not being here. None of these things are real in the Eibush. There's no space. There's no here and there's no there. So what does it mean he removed himself? From where? From a space. But the space exists only to us. To him that space continues to be a non-space. So what does it mean removal? So the whole union of Hashem being not here or not there is attributing to him Mokkah. He has no shachas to Mokkah. That's number one. And this first svara, you should know, is probably the most important and probably the most difficult to understand. I just knocked it off in 30 seconds because I don't know what else to say in it. But what it means that since Hashem has no Mokum, you cannot say that he has a connection to being in Mokum in a context of being removed versus not being removed. So that's number two. Af comes a second point. This is wrong for a different reason. What is the reason? The Rambam, the question of Yediyah. Since those who believe in Tzimtzum Kipshutei are still, they're from a Yidden. They believe. Because they're descendants of believers. Hashem knows, the key word here is Hashem knows what's happening in a dynamic world. And you have the issue of Hashem knows what's happening in a dynamic world. That has to imprint in him dynamism, change, and Hashem cannot change. And the Rambam resolved the question of Yediyah by saying, Hu v'daiti echad, hu ayedei and aidu, and hu amada. The world and the Eibishter are one. He knows by knowing himself. And that's why there's no shin in the Eibishter. He knows all the formations and creation in this lowest realm, and he's involved in their lives and running it b'ashgacha pratis. And you must say that that the fact Hashem knows us is not adding to him and renewing him, because that would be the opposite of the definition of Elokus, like the Rambam argued. And how are you going to explain that Hashem knows what's happening in a changing world, and Hashem is mashgiach to what's happening in a changing world, and at the same doesn't affect the change in him? You're going to say the reason he could be involved in a changing world and not change because he knows by knowing himself. In other words, the only way to explain this is to say Harei, so to speak. Mahu Seivat Smusei, the Eibush to himself, Vidaite, and his knowledge. And I want to add also very importantly, and what he knows, which is us. Hakalechat has to be one. If you say Tzimtzum Gibshute, it's not one. Hashem is here and we're there, whatever here and there means. So he's knowing from outside of himself. It's Hepech, the question of Yediyah. How could Hashem know what's happening in a changing world and it's not imprinting and changing itself? In other words, the real mukkah, or I should say, the mukkah that I understand, the first point that about the Eibishter being Mikri Aguf, I go through it quick because I don't understand it. The second point is, the real basis for why we hold Tzimtzum Gibshute is a Rambam. Because Hashem knows what's happening in this world. He cannot be involved in a changing world without changing, unless you say Hu Hayedei and Hayedun Hu Hamada. And if you hold Hu Hayedei and Hayedun Hu Hamada, you must hold that the Eibishter is here. Tzimtzum Shalei Kibshut. Or to say in different words, the world is God. Now goes the third rai. The third rai is Pashat Maimar Chazal. First of all, Tikkun Nun Zayin says as follows: the Leis Asar Ponim Inei, there is no place where he is vacant. Lebi Elohim v'Lebi or in the higher worlds and the lower worlds. Hashem is everywhere. If Hashem is everywhere, you can't say Tzimtzum Gibshut. Now I mentioned this to you a few times already. There's a letter from the Baal Shem Tov in Atomim. I should really copy it and give it out. The Baal Shem Tov wrote defending himself. Someone criticized the Helik of Baal Shem Tov. He was against Chassidus and Chassidim. And now the Baal Shem Tov writes to him, I don't know what your objection is. Shita Seinu, our Shita is a tziruf of Shitas Hapardes. It's Chaim, Be'inyin, Leis Asar Ponim Inei. That's what Baal Shem Tov writes. Our Shita, what do we hold? What is Chassidus? It's a synthesis, it's a combination of Arizal and Pardes, Arizal and Namak, in the Inyan Leis Asar Ponim Inei. What's Chassidus? Leis Asar Ponim Inei. Alphas Alakus. There's no place where he isn't. Oh, but I mehem the Pachas Pinchas. Now goes a second there. EU Tafes Bakula. Hashem grasps everything. V'leisman the Tafes Bei V'chuli, nothing grasps him. EU Save of Kalalman. He fills the world in a hidden way, V'chuli, etc. EU Mamalik Kalalman. He fills the world in a way that the world is able to experience it. V'leisman the Nofek Mereshus Elabar. Nothing goes from his Reshus outside. Nothing is outside of the Eibishter. EU Mamalik Kalalman. He fills up all the worlds. EU Mekasher and Meyachet. He ties and unifies the Inelazina one side to another. Eila Batata higher and lower. Okay, you say there is no union amongst the four elements only because of the Eibishter. When he is amongst them, the whole actus in the creation is because the Eibishter is here. If the Eibishter is outside the Makamacholo, then the actus is separate from him. Whatever unity and order there is in the world. So the Lashon, the Desire is saying he grasps everything, and nothing grasps him means to say what? He grasps everything means he's personally involved in each creation. Nothing grasps him means that as far as he is concerned, the world is an actus. The world doesn't break him up. He's one. The Nakuda is, he brought now three rayas to Tzimtzum Shalei Kibshut. First of all, that you cannot say Mokken by the Eibishter, and therefore you can't say here and there. Second of all, the question of Yediyah. And third of all, these two zayas. What is the pshat? Nobody can hold the Eibishter. Sheimi, there is no possibility. It should be grasped with the intellectual access and reach of one's wisdom and mind. Even the supernal intellectuals, forget about us, but even the intellectuals at the level of Elyon, and Elyon goes on Atzilus. Even the Kalim of Atzilus cannot be Masig Alakus. The Mahusei Vatsamuth Shalakadish Baruch, where the Eibishter himself. It says in Zayah, Steam, the whole steam, and he is a mystery and a secret compared to all those that are mysteries and secrets. In other words, even those Madreges of Alakus that are concealed, the whole Seder Shtashlos, the Eibishter, they have no Shaychas. There is no thought that can grasp Hashem whatsoever. There's no Keder that can hold the Eibishter. So Hashem holds all of us, and none of us can hold him. Even the lower worlds, though Hashem is revealed in all the worlds, it's not like the soul of a person inside his body, for two reasons. The Eibishter is not on Neshama Togu for two reasons. First of all, he creates our guf also. He's not just creating a Neshama, he's creating our guf. Second of all, Hashem gives Chayis. He's inspiring us, but we don't have a hold on him. It doesn't affect the change in him. Let's read the words. It's not like the soul of a person in a body. She nitfesas teich aguf, that the neshama is entering into the body, is that the body holds it. Ad mispa elis, that the neshama is affected. Umekabelas shinuyim, and it receives change. Mishinui aguf etzare, from the changes in the body and from the pain of the body. For example, me'akos, when the body is hit, like kiris or coldness, or chamimas or esh or heat, from fire or ketza and so forth. Mashen came back Kadosh Baruch as opposed to the Eibishter. She'enim makabel shum shini mishinui elam hazeh. There's no change affected in him from the changes of this world. Mikayis l'chedef, miyam l'layla, from summer to winter, from day to night. Kediksiv, as the pasuk says, gam cheshech layachashek mimeka, even darkness does not blacken lagabe the Eibishter. L'layla kayem yoyin, as far as the Alakus is concerned, night shines exactly like the day. Hashem is not at all grasped in the way in the worlds in a way of Gili and Teich. Even though the Eibush is revealed to us, there's a sugi in Chassidus that's called Ein Kodesh Kahavaya. There's nobody holy like Havaya, and on this Ein Kodesh Kahavaya it says in Zeir Kama Kaddish and Inu. There's many different levels of Kaddish. There's no Kodesh Kahavaya. So Chassidus explains. There's a mind from Alten Rebbe also, Bekitzer Nimnet, that for something to be Kaddish means they're removed. So Seiv of Kalaman is Kaddish. Hashem's Eidin of a Seiv of Kalaman is here. It's Kaddish. Kaddish means to say it's affecting us, we're not affecting it. The Chiddush of Ein Kaddish Kavaya is Mamalik Kalaman. That even though the title Mamalik Kalaman is Gilui, and Mamalik Kalaman meaning Gilui means his Chalkos. You get your Chayes, he gets his Chayes, and I get my Chayes. Ein Kaddish Kavaya. Even though he's revealed in us, and he's revealed in us in a way that is specific, Legabe us, there's a split. Legabe him, there's Achtus. And therefore, even though even the chayes of Mamalik Alaman, which is revealed in us in a way that's personal, the change is only from our end. From the Mamalik Alaman, there's no change whatsoever. It's still one. And this is called Ein Kodesh Havaya. Only Havaya. Only Havaya could be Kodesh, even though it's Behis Galus, Behis Lapshas in the Guf. Now, in some places they speak Ein Kodesh Havaya about Mamalik Alaman in Atzilus. But there's a Maimah from the Rebbe, where the Rebbe says Al Derech, he doesn't use that Lashon, Ein Kodesh Havaya, even in Biyah, where you don't even have Ein Sof, it's only Ein Neshama, it's Ein Mugbal. At the Chayas Alaki, which is Mislabish in the Nivraim of Bria, Tzir and Asiyah, affects us without being affected.